Welcome to the Gaming Bench. This video is part 2 of my build of a Victorian era game called Halma. Now, Halma is a pretty straightforward race game with some light strategy, but the reason I'm excited to be building it is because of this absolutely preposterously huge board. So if you want to see how I got to this point, go watch the other video first. And then we'll finish it up in this video. Okay, all good? Let's get back to it. Now, as you might imagine, between the end of the last video and this one, I've been doing a lot of sanding. This is a big board and it was really uneven, but it's been going pretty well. I got some of these mesh sanding pads as a free bonus when I ordered from a wood company recently. And they seem to work great. This is 100 grit, and it seems to be making short work of this. Now, the tricky part is going to be sanding these squares of different heights. So I'm going to figure out something for that. But for now, just need to get back to sanding. Sanding the bulk of the board was actually pretty easy, as was sanding the tops of these 3/4 inch pieces. So the tricky thing is these 1/2 inch pieces and these little corners where I can't get the Rin orbit in is going to be a problem. So I just have a block of wood that I've attached some sandpaper to, and I'm going to just do this the old style way, I guess. That worked surprisingly well. All right, so all that leaves me with now are these single 1/2 inch squares and these corners that are just going to be a huge pain to get into, but let's see what happens. Hey, guess who just remembered they own an oscillating tool? I've actually never used it for the sanding feature before. I've only used it to cut things at an awkward angle. But I've already done 2 corners with the tool and it works pretty great. So this should save me a ton of time and elbow grease. All right, I think that is essentially done. I'm gonna wipe this down, probably raise the grain and then sand it up to 220. And then I got to figure out how I want to finish this thing. I have a little bit of overhang on the one side with the MDF that I need to trim off. So this feels kind of sketchy, but I'm gonna try to use my track saw and just run it along the edge here, and hopefully I can get a nice clean straight line. I did a bunch of fiddling with the track saw. Not surprisingly, considering how I built this thing, the corners weren't square. So I ended up trimming off the cherry border I had on the outside as I squared up the edges. I'm just going to replace that because I have several of these cherry strips left. And then my plan all along was to put an extra border along the outside. And I think I'm going to make that out of walnut. I replaced the cedar border that I cut off when I was squaring up the sides, and then I put an additional walnut border with a chamfer around the edges I only have 2 clamps that are actually wide enough to fit this size board. So I had to get kind of creative with my clamping here. Now I need to give it another sanding around the edge, get rid of some of this glue, squeeze out. I have a little bit of saw burn marks. And then I need to go over the entire thing again, sand it up to 220, and then finally I'll be able to add some finish to this. All right, after so much sanding, this thing finally ready to go. Maybe a little bit more here. I'm using a semi-gloss polyurethane because I want this not to be super shiny, but I do want it to have a bit of a sheen to it. All right, here we go. I'll end up putting, I don't know, 4 or 5 coats of polyurethane on that board before it's all over. But while that first coat dries, I can start working on the pieces. So traditionally, there are enough pieces for 19 black, 19 white, that's for the 2-player game, and in addition, 13 green and 13 red, that's for the 4-player game. You each get 13 pieces for the 4-player game. But I don't like that. I think you should play whatever color you want. You shouldn't be limited to black and white if there's only 2 people playing. So I'm gonna make enough pieces, 19 pieces of each color. It's 12 extra pieces, and I'm already having to make, it'll make 76 total pieces. So what's a handful of more pieces? I was worried about how to make that many identical pieces, but then I was looking at this book, Making Peg, Board, and Dice Games. I got it from Half Price Books for $4. It's weak on history, but strong on DIY. And they have Halma in this book. And what they suggested were just buying small finials. And I thought that was a great idea. So I bought a box of 100 of these. So these are, just the finial to go on top of the banister or whatever. I'll end up cutting the peg off the bottom, and then they're the perfect size. I mean, I made the board to fit the pieces, so of course they're the perfect size. So all of these pieces, they're finished, ready to go, but they're a little rougher than I'd like, so I'm gonna sand them down a little bit more before I move to painting them. To make this as easy as possible, I'm gonna chuck them up in my drill and sand them that way. All right, that's all of them. I did some tests, and the finials by themselves, once you cut the peg off of them, aren't as stable as I would like. So I bought a bunch of these 1-inch discs that I'm going to glue to the bottom. Give them a little more stability, and I like the look of it. But first, I need to cut the pegs off of all of these. I really struggled with how to cut the pegs off of these. You know, I started with just a saw, which, you know, precision isn't my thing, and I was having a hard time getting it completely parallel. A lot of the test pieces I made had a little bit of a weird lean to them because I couldn't cut them straight. Then I would cut the peg off, and I tried grinding them down flat, and that wasn't working. So what I finally ended up doing is I got a piece of oven-baked clay, and I put this thing in here, and I put it against the blade of my table saw so that it was, you know, the blade was completely parallel to the bottom, and then I baked it. So this should hold it exactly in place. I'm going to hot glue this down to my crosscut sled, and that should allow me to cut it off flush. Otherwise, all the pieces are going to sit on the board and look like drunken sailors. All right, I have this in position, and holding this is going to put my fingers a little closer to the blade than I'm comfortable with, so I think I'm going to do it like this. See how this goes. All right, managed to do that without cutting off any of my fingers. Got a little worried in the middle. The hot glue started to give way, so I had to put a little extra hot glue around it to hold it in place, but all good. Now there's a little bit of a fuzzy edge on these, so I got to give them just a tiny bit of sanding, and then on to the next thing. Here's the 4 armies, all lined up. Next, need to glue them to their little bases. Okay, that is all 3 armies glued to their bases and ready for paint. And finally, we're done. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I love how the pieces look. I think the 4 armies, the colors look great. I especially love the green. But of course, the real star of the show is this board. It is just preposterously huge and ridiculous, and I can't wait to start playing on it. Man, just look at it. All right. Reminder that I put out a video every week, one on the rules, history, and strategy of an ancient game, and one or sometimes 2 on how I build my own version of the game. So I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing. All right, I'll see you next time on The Gaming Bench.